Greetings and salutations, fellow gamers. Lukey P here with another episode of Let's Play Supreme Ruler Ultimate with Brazil. It's actually been a fair while off camera, probably a week, maybe a bit longer, since I last recorded an episode for this series. Work has just been manic, unfortunately, and I think, as I've said in previous episodes, I do tend to play games in bulk almost. So I will play a game quite a lot, record a lot of episodes, and then slowly drip feed them out over time. So I'm actually recording this episode, I think, what's the date today? It is 16th of September, so I'm recording it on that date, but I doubt it will be out until towards the end of September by the time I've edited it and posted it up. So I've got a bit of a backlog of episodes recorded to keep me going while work is crazy. But I thought it was worth recording this episode. It's been nearly a month since we last recorded an episode Game Time. I think we left it on the 29th of November. So for anybody in the gaming world here, December 25th, Happy Christmas in 1950. It's a happy Christmas for Brazil, not so much for the President of the USA, who has lost large chunks of America. I think this was the case last episode as well, but the war with America is effectively over. We're basically just mopping up. I don't see how they can mount any kind of resistance from here. We are nearly at the border with Canada. That's how much of America we've taken. We have gone through some pretty major cities like Chicago, whole bunch of them. Did we take Miami yet? Miami's just down here. We're about to take Miami. Washington's not that far away. It would be great if once we got to Washington they surrendered, mainly because, as in all previous episodes I've recorded in the war with America, Pearl Harbor is an absolute nightmare to take. So I just don't have the supply to get where is Pearl Harbor? Is that it? Have I gone to the wrong part of the country? No, there we are. Pearl Harbor is that one. Yeah, we just keep losing units on sea transport across there, and yeah, it's just a real pain, basically, to be honest. So I'm trying to build a seaport there, and in fact I'm building seaports at each of these little islands, I think, so that my subs can get repaired without having to go all the way back home each time. But at sea, we are, Pearl Harbor's been a real pain. The computer's decided it wants to bring across these units from the Middle East to finish the war with America. So we've started to lose units around here as they hit the US. Few ships which are left, I guess. But we are also starting to make landfall, and these units will link up soon, and given the bulk of our forces will be in this area, we will probably look to take Canada pretty soon after the US, and just finish off anything else in the Americas, and then move our forces back, decide at what point we want to take on Germany. Germany remain strongish, 3 million, but they're not really a threat to us. In fact, to be honest, no one's really a threat to us anymore on this game. So we've got an army staff of about 8 million. I've more or less stopped producing units because we're still building a bunch of them because they're on auto build, or they were still building before I told the computer to stop doing auto builds. But yeah, because basically my biggest enemy might become the speed my machine can run this game at with the number of units I've got. It's still running pretty quick. I've got a pretty good custom machine, fortunately. So that's just a bit of an update on what was going on in the war. Now, one of my subscribers did ask if I could talk a bit more about the economy and how it was working. So I've spoken about that in previous episodes, but the economy does change a bit as you get bigger. So whereas before it was all about what was going on down here, and you can see we've actually still got, you know, an absolute load of production capabilities down there. Now it's also about the fact that, you know, we've stomped through and we've taken all the US's oil fields. So I now have more oil than I know what to do with, really. So let me talk a bit about the economy and about inflation and increasing population, which were the two specific things I got asked about in one of the comments. So the economy when you're a big nation is quite a bit different to when you are a smaller nation. So at the start of the game, for those of you who've been watching since the start, probably up to about episode 10 or so, maybe a bit longer, we just had our original Brazilian territory. We focused on improving our supply to improve our efficiency, keep our production nice and efficient. We tried to manage inflation, so our inflation at the moment is at 18%. Towards the start we had problems with it kind of nudging up into the mid-20s. Our unemployment is 2.5%. Really, I'd like to see that around about 3%. Our unemployment was as low as 2.1%, I think, at one point, and that's at the point at which you start to see inflation get higher, because you have to, in effect, businesses pay people more because there's not many of them unemployed. Tourism is 19%. It's because nobody wants to come to the country who's constantly at war and conquering everyone else. So, yes, at the start of the game, that's how we were running our economy. We were trying to keep inflation quite low. We did this at times by having to restrict how much we could spend. So because we were a smaller country with a smaller economy, if I was to build what I call a supply hub, which is like one air base and two supply depots, I'm just going to see if I can find one. There's near field. I must have one around here somewhere. There we are, there's one. Airbase and 2 supply depots to make the supply 100% basically around this area. That could have put my inflation up by, I think we tested it actually in some of the earlier episodes, and it would put inflation up by like 1.5% at times. And that was because, in effect, spending money puts extra money into the economy. So in effect, you're taking money out of your country's treasury and pumping it into the economy, which will drive up inflation, because inflation is, in effect, how much money is there in the economy. Now when you're huge like I am now, I can easily build a large number of things without having to be concerned about inflation going up. So for example, at the moment I am doing 780 million per day on construction, and that is simply rebuilding some of the things which have been damaged as I've been conquering the US. It's putting supply depots on the front line like that, so that they are able to keep well supplied. Because you can see here, for example, units are starting to run out of supply. That's going to be tricky. To get the Air Force over there probably at some point to take out that capital ship. So when you're bigger, you can build a lot more because your economy's bigger without driving inflation up. So that's one thing which has changed quite a lot, and means really now I don't have to worry about inflation to an extent. I mean, I think if it got really, really high, I would do something about it. But at the moment, I am able to build what I want, and inflation tends to hover between 10 and 20%. Another reason for that is our population. So we are conquering countries constantly now to expand our population, and as we do, let's say we have 2.5% unemployment. Let's have a look at these guys. These have got 2.6% unemployment at the moment. Now, when I conquer them, I will take all their population and I will take all their land. Odds are I will not rebuild all their industries. So in effect, there are some people there at the moment who are working on this ore mine out here, which I probably wouldn't rebuild that, so they then won't be working. So that means that I will conquer this country, but I won't put all of them directly back to work. The best example of that was probably China. So when we conquered China over here, there was a lot of stuff we did not rebuild, and in fact you saw it even more so in some of the earlier episodes when I was conquering South America. I was actively going round off screen after conquests, decommissioning and scrapping everything I conquered, basically. So I would conquer a country and I would go around and I would scrap anything I didn't need. So any power plants, any agriculture, any ore mines in poor supply areas, I would scrap all of those, which means that as I'm expanding, I'm getting in effect more productive population. The other thing which happens as I expand is I get a bigger tax base, which is really important for the economy, and I get a bigger population to sell to, so I get what I call a bigger internal market. By the way, if you can hear any noise in the background, it's because a torrential rain shower has started, which hopefully my mic won't pick up, but we'll see on the playback. Yes, more people to tax and a bigger internal market. So what do I mean by this? So at the start, we would produce goods around here. Particularly, we would look to produce consumer goods, and we would then export them. And you would see in our economy that we would have, we'd have an income, we'd have expenses which were higher, normally because of our research budget, and we would have a large amount of exports, or I would be doing deals with countries. So I would be going to China and I'd be saying, here's 500 million of consumer goods, give me 1.4 billion, or whatever the rate I could get for them was. So I was in effect propping up my economy by exporting. So I would produce stuff and I would export it, and I would export it at really good margins, and that was what allowed us in the early game to start building up our research capacity and to start building up eventually our military capacity. Now, as you get a lot bigger, your economy shifts, or at least mine has in this game. So I no longer bother doing any deals. So it's not that I've deleted any diplomatic exchanges I've done. It's literally that is the only diplomatic exchange I have made in the last month, which was Romania asked me for some coal, and I looked at it and thought, why not? I mean, I could do exchanges, so I could very easily go to Germany and say, you have got, you've not got much oil. I've got loads of oil. There you go. Not as good profit as it has been in the past, incidentally. That's because they're running out of money, that's why. Yeah, okay. Incidentally, they're probably running out of money because I'm not trading oil with them. Yeah. So we could sell stuff and we could do it at like 100% margin. That being the example there. But what I'm doing instead, in effect, is I am relying on my internal market to absorb most of what I'm producing. So you can see here, we could produce a load more oil, a bit more timber, a bit more rubber, a bit more agriculture, and as we did that, we could produce more. That would drive our unemployment down, that would drive our inflation up, because we'd have more people in work, and then we could export it and we would get more money in. But at this stage, why would I want to export stuff? Because exporting stuff helps the rest of the world. And I don't need to help the rest of the world anymore. I'm self-sufficient in and of myself. And the reason for that is, if I look at my income and expenses are quite nicely balanced. You can see I narrowly lost some money the previous day. That was probably because of construction or whatever. Those of you who've been watching for a while will know that at one point this was 1.8 trillion as a treasury rather than 1.1 trillion. So I've spent an awful lot funding these wars, but I can afford to do that. Because at one point I was making, I think, 2 or 3 billion a day after conquering China, and the reason for that is that we have two main sources of income, so taxes and production. Taxes, actually, let me step back a little bit. So ideally you need these two together to outnumber all of this. Okay, so state is like your intelligence, treasury is your social services and your construction and your facilities maintenance, production is the goods you make, research is obviously research, and defence is your army. Now, my army I've stopped building so much because I've decided that at 6.5 billion a day or whatever that is, 6.5 billion, English billion I should say, so at 6.5 billion a day, that's as big a military as I need to conquer the world, given we've just thrashed America, who were the main rival to us before that. So I could keep building more military, and if I was to make a really significant military breakthrough and get some really brilliant unit, I may, crank out a load of them just for the fun of it. But at the moment, this is a nice size military for the income I've got. If I go bigger, I need to expand my income to support it. Same with research, and actually research I definitely don't need to expand, because where I've been conquering everyone, I've got 38 available research slots. So I've got way more than I can use. So you can see here how the internal market works. So I am spending 14.7, nearly 14.8 billion producing goods each day. I am selling those goods for 23 billion on the internal market. So if I do round numbers, 15 billion of production, 23 billion of sales. So I'm making 8 billion a day from selling to my internal population, which allows me to offset that plus that, roughly. Not quite. That's about 1 billion more. But in effect, I'm offsetting with my production surplus. So the money I make selling to my market, internal market, is about 8, and that plus that is 9. So it doesn't quite balance out, but it does balance out when you factor in the fact that I'm selling 1.2 billion each day. I'm exporting it abroad, so it's mainly consumer goods. It's a little bit of electric power and a tiny amount of agriculture, it looks like, and consumer goods I think are being exported because, I've said basically you can sell 95% of surplus production now, because I'm just trying to balance my economy. I could stop selling those abroad if I really wanted to turn the pressure on the rest of the world, because what that would do is they wouldn't be able to provide consumer goods to their populations, which would cause them severe problems. So you can see, if you look at this, so top exports on a given day, so they're managing to export 474 tons. They're roughly balanced in their country. They're managing to export 79 tons. They're roughly balanced. Me, I'm exporting 16,000 tons. So I'm basically the entire export supply of the world. So I could cut off consumer goods to the world at any time. But I don't want to do that because it's just helping my economy stay roughly balanced, which I quite like. I don't like to be losing money all the time. And then taxes. So our tax rate is still pretty high. It's pretty high from show it. So yeah, tax rate's up at 70%ish, and it's pretty high from the days early on we were using that to manage inflation, and I've never seen the need to put it back down. And so again, that brings us in 8 billion for free, pretty much. I say for free, it's taxes. So that's designed to help cover social services. So I'm spending 6.6 billion on social services, and I'm getting 8.6 billion in taxes. So there's another 2 billion there, and that's helping pay for facilities maintenance, which isn't much, 150 million a day, and my construction, which in the past, in reality, I used to fund. Very early on, I used to save up for something, so I'd wait until I'd saved a certain amount and then invest it in some coal power plants or whatever. At the moment, construction, with the size I am, is pretty much an ongoing expense, and what it is almost irrelevant because of the size of our bank balance. So if I need to spend much more than that to, let's say, build supply depots all along the border, I would do. If I didn't need to be spending it, I wouldn't spend it. And all of this is largely driven by the size of our population. So we have 1.8 billion people now. So we, just because of our size of our conquest, so if I compare it with everybody else, US is down to 83 million, basically because we conquered most of them. Germany is 359 million. They are our nearest rivals in theory. But they're not really going to do much to. The war when it comes with Germany will be interesting, but I suspect it to be a bit of a foregone conclusion. A bit like this war with the US is at the moment. It's just a case of me playing it out and sitting around and waiting for my units to conquer stuff. I'm not really having to manage much anymore. It's now just a case of I have overwhelming military force. Which we've built up, which people can't compete with. And that overwhelming military force is as a result of my strong economy, which says I can afford a military which costs me 6.5 billion a day, and the rest of the world simply cannot. So it's this virtuous circle, you can use either. This virtuous circling effect, which basically says I get more population, which means I have more people to sell stuff to and more people to tax. That then allows me to run a bigger economy, which allows me to afford more research or to spend more on my military. Having a bigger military and better research means you're better able to conquer more countries, which therefore puts your population up, which starts the cycle again. And by conquering people, as I've said, you actually help manage your inflation normally, because what I'm doing is I'm conquering things, and I do not need their entire population I conquer to go to work to be able to support the needs of my people. So you can see on all of these, I'm producing a small surplus, quite a large surplus there. and so and a big surplus on electric power, so we don't really need. So in theory, for example, if I conquered Canada, I could scrap every one of their power plants and still probably have a pretty big excess of electricity. So that helps manage my inflation, along with high taxes, and my social spend is still quite low, again, to help manage inflation. But you can see they're all nudging towards the middle now. Law enforcement is quite high, and that is to stifle any rebellions. So I've seen a lot of playthroughs with people who seem to have massive problems with rebels, particularly in China, and they seem to spend their entire time fighting off rebels, a bit like Germany. And as best as I can tell, the answer to that is to just increase your police spending, your law enforcement spending, which I think is great value. It's only 500 million a day, and I can probably count the number of rebels I've had on my fingers. I think I had 2 or 3 in South America, a handful in China. I think that was it, really. So rebels haven't really featured in my game. So that is an overview of the first 5 minutes. I spoke a bit about the progress since the last episode, and the rest of it I've spoken at the request of one of my subscribers about how the economy is working. So hopefully that has been useful. It's been interesting in some ways to think about this episode, because having not played it for a little while and knowing I wanted to do something talking about the economy, I did a bit of digging in some of my previous episodes and actually watched bits of them to see what I was doing at various points in time, and how that's changed. So I think that's probably it for this episode. So we haven't actually played at all, but that is because the intent of this episode was to talk through the economy and what it is like to manage an economy in effect when you are the powerhouse of the globe at this point. So I've said in previous episodes, population is power, because it allows you to do so much. So I could, if worse came to worse and I was short of people, I could scrap any garrisons. So I think the computer automatically puts garrisons in a lot of conquered territories. So all of these guys have probably got garrisons if I go and look at them. No, they haven't. Poor choice. Poor choice. What about the US? Have they got any garrisons? Yeah, they are. So there's a garrison in there. So he's never going to be threatened. He's in the middle of the US. For the US to take that, we would have to have had an absolute disaster. So I could clear out all the garrisons in this country and free up a load of people if I needed to. But I don't. So I will wrap that episode there. Hopefully this has helped anyone who's got questions about the economy. If there's anything I've missed, or you'd like to ask further questions, do let me know in the comments. If you found this video helpful, please do like. If you really like, please do subscribe. I do appreciate it. It does encourage me. So this Supreme Ruler Ultimate series, I think, is my most watched series, and I am doing another series on Skyrim, but it's a bit less frequently done because it only tends to get 1 or 2 views, whereas this gets a bit more. So we'll wrap it there. Thank you as always for watching. I'm Lukey P, and I will see you again soon.